Good morning, YouTube. Let's clean these glasses. I'm gonna bring both devices together. So TikTok is right here with YouTube. Good morning, everyone on YouTube. We are continuing with Reconstruction. I think the time should be 10:30 now. Oh, it's still 10:29, but we'll go ahead and get started. So do me a favor, go ahead and share with three others. Go ahead and share with three others. If this is your first time on and you're on TikTok, make sure you go ahead and follow. And I'll give some other instructions so you can keep up with our class. We meet weekly, either Thursday or Friday, just depends on what I have going on. And so today we're meeting on a Friday, but our goal is to meet on Thursdays. But sometimes life be life and other responsibilities come about, but I am committed to providing this course weekly. So make sure you share, make sure you follow. All right. So today we're picking back up with Reconstruction. That's where we left off last week. So, a couple of housekeeping things. Let me sip some water. A couple of housekeeping things. Make sure that you're taking notes. Make sure that you're taking notes. And ooh, that's close. Let me move this computer back. Trying not to have TikTok right in my face. Make sure you're taking notes. Make sure you have the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. If you don't have a good copy of it, my suggestion is to Google U.S. Constitution and then put Cornell Law behind it. And it should pull up Cornell Law School's database. And I like utilizing their constitutional tool because it provides great resources and explanations along with it. That website is law.cornell.edu/constitution. law.cornell.edu/constitution. And I'm going to put that on the YouTube if someone can put it in our TikTok. Just copy the link. Child, going between a PC and a Mac, I forget how to copy and paste half the time. All right, so it is there in the comments on YouTube. That is where I recommend. I just find it very useful and easy to navigate. All right. So how y'all doing? Y'all doing good? Hopefully everyone's doing good. So today our main focus is Reconstruction. We started it last week. And we talked about the lead up to the Civil War, who participated in the Civil War, the Confederacy. We talked about the Union, right? The Union and the Confederacy. So the Union is the United States of America. The Confederacy is the United States of the Confederacy. Okay. Did I mess that up? Confederacy. No, let me start over. The Union is the United States of America. The Confederacy is the Confederate States of America. So you have the USA and the CSA. All right. The USA and the CSA. Thank you, Shelby, for putting that up there for us. And I'm going to pin that. So we have the United States of America, and then we have the Confederate States of America. These two sovereignties, so the United States, and then the Confederacy States of America. So the United States in 1861, when the Civil War took off, the United States was under the same constitution we're under today. And so, by effect, by their succession, those 13 states that succeeded, SECEDED, that succeeded from the Union, right? The Union, those 13 states became an enemy, a foreign enemy. You could argue that they were a domestic enemy had they not withdrawn, but because they had withdrawn from the Union, they then became a foreign enemy. Now, typically in a history class, no one's going to go in depth and explain it to you like that. But when you look at the reality of the thing, that's exactly what happened. Okay. And we don't like to talk about it like that because those 13 states that pulled out, so they succeeded, those 13 later rejoined the Union. And so that's going to be us talking about Reconstruction. I'm just cleaning my screen, YouTube. I'm about to do the same thing to y'all on TikTok. All right. So that's where we are this morning. So do me a favor, so I know everyone is ready to go. Put Reconstruction in the chat. Let me see Reconstruction in the chat. Reconstruction. Good morning. Good morning, Courtney, Nikki. Is it Starla or Star? I'm kind of far from that screen, so I can't really see it. Rhonda and Valerie over on YouTube. Jolanda, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Yes, put Reconstruction in the chat so I know that we are ready to go. Reconstruction. Hey, Shawana, thank you. I know you're working, but you're listening. I appreciate that. Make sure, for those of you who are working and listening and you can't take notes, don't worry. Make sure you're not worried about the notes. You can always go to YouTube and watch the replay. That's the beauty of this thing. So let me just give a few housekeeping, and then we're going to dig into our lecture about Reconstruction. I've kind of already warmed you up. So TikTok is where this thing took off from, but I do want to remind everyone to make sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube page, Pretty Petty Politics. And the reason for that is this is how we keep a backup. This is our redundancy. This is to keep us safe should come April. Remember, there was a pause on ending TikTok. So April, this thing gonna come back up. And so because of the uncertainty of what will happen, please be mindful and please make sure you're subscribed on YouTube because we're going to continue either way. I know at the beginning I talked about having Substack. I have the account. It's just a matter of me having the time. Y'all, I thought I took stuff off my plate, which I did. I took a lot of stuff off my plate in 2024 or towards the end of 2024. However, here in 2025, it seems like I'm just as busy. So just work with me as I continue to get my bearings and get things together. But we will utilize the YouTube. I will use the Substack. It's just a matter of me carving out a scheduled time for it. Because baby, when I come home from work, it's a wrap. If I come home and I wrap this hair, baby, ain't no videos, ain't no writing. It's my head to the pillow on that sofa and I'm chilling, streaming something, or I'm reading something until I go to bed. So just bear with me. I work really hard. I did my self-evaluation yesterday and I compared it this morning to the one from last year. Y'all, it's 5 pages longer. It's 5 pages longer, a difference a year makes. So I work really hard. I'm devoted to this work, to education. And so I don't always have the time to go the extra step. So you have your career, you have your organizations, you have your community work, you have your love life, your family. Baby, where is the time? Plus I cook. I cook because I have to eat, but I also cook for other people. Child, it's just too much. So, having said all of that, just bear with me, y'all. That's all I'm saying. All right. So, we got a couple of people who are doing both. They're working and streaming. So, thank you all. So, what time is it? 10:39. Y'all should be ready now. We ready? All right. As I was saying earlier, Reconstruction, right? We have the Union. So we're going to go back a few years because the Civil War doesn't kick off till 1861. It's 1861 to 1865. So it's a 4-year period. It's basically an administration. It's basically Lincoln's administration, that term of his. We're in his term as president. Okay. Lincoln gives a speech known as the Emancipation Proclamation. And last week I said, it's like an executive order. It's not law, but it has the effect of law. And I don't want to confuse y'all and say that it was an executive order. It was a proclamation. So I caught myself after I said it, but I was like, I'm not going back to explain all of that. But the Emancipation Proclamation was Lincoln's mandate, so to speak, to end slavery and to release enslaved people, to emancipate them. Earlier this week, we were talking about this in class, and I explained it to my students as emancipation being like, you have people that you may have known when you were in school that emancipated from their parents at an early age. So they're no longer under someone else's influence, direction, ownership, so to speak. So emancipation was just that. The problem with the emancipation in 1863, January 1st, 1863, the problem with that emancipation was that people did not oblige it. It wasn't obliged to, okay? But the war started in 1861. The Emancipation Proclamation was 1863. So I want to talk about that spot today. I also want to talk about prior to the Civil War. So in 1860, Civil War starts in 1861, Civil War starts. But in 1860, we have the first state to succeed from the nation. All right. The first state to succeed from the Union. Okay. And this state is when it was a state, all right, we're going to talk about it in present day, but we're going to talk about it in past tense too. So prior to its withdrawal from the Union, that state was heavily populated with Black people who were enslaved. Their population still today, great bit of number of Black folks there. There's a lot of history in this state. And so when that state withdrew from the Union in 1860, they set a precedence, okay? And that was the great state of, anybody want to guess? Anybody remember from last week? What state was that first withdrew from the Union? And I'm at my island today instead of the table, and it is not the most comfortable. I might go get another chair. Having to sit here for 2 hours. All right, thank you, Courtney, South Carolina. South Carolina, Courtney beat y'all over on YouTube. TikTok, y'all got to wake up. But South Carolina was the first to withdraw from the Union, okay? And South Carolina has always had this thing about it, right? And you can still see it in present day time. We can think back 10 years ago, what happened in South Carolina, June 17th, 2015, in Charleston, South Carolina. We can look at the history of Charleston, South Carolina, We can look at all the things that have taken place in South Carolina that relate back to this period of Reconstruction and the period of the Civil War. So it should be of no surprise that South Carolina stood on their business, right, based on their ideology, that they stood on business in the way that they did and withdrew from the Union. Give me 1 second. Let me get another chair. I can't do this stool today. All right. So South Carolina withdraws, and 12 others would withdraw as well. And what we call a succession, they would succeed. I don't know how low this is going to take me. Hopefully not too low. Oh, not too bad. Okay. They would succeed from the Union. Let me just move some stuff. Give me 1 second. So they succeeded. There we go. They succeeded from the Union. So South Carolina, Texas, Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia. Who else am I forgetting? Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia. Did I name them all? Did I get all 13? I know I'm forgetting somebody, maybe Arkansas. But last week I gave a link. I thought it was 13, Courtney. Maybe it is 11. Y'all, I'm tired. It's been a long week. But when they broke off, that they created their own documents. Okay, they created their own documents in Texas. I'll focus on Texas because that's where I reside. Texas created what is known as the Declaration of Causes. Okay, the Declaration of Causes, and in the Declaration of Causes, they state very clearly as to why they are leaving. Okay. And what do y'all think that reason was? I don't think any of us will get this wrong. Why did they leave? Of course, it was because of slavery, right? They left because of slavery. Now, the answer to most things, the United States of America has a genesis that dates back into slavery. It just is what it is. It's our reality. Slavery, you can't talk U.S. government, U.S. history and not talk slavery. You have to talk about the institution of slavery because they were not two separate entities. They were hand in hand. Okay. And what I want to make very clear today about January 1st, 1863, Lincoln emancipated the slave population, those people who were enslaved. He emancipated them not just to free them, but to empower the Union, because the Union was getting its ass kicked. I don't know if y'all knew that. But the Union was losing. And because the Union was losing, that was the alternative. The alternative was to give some additional muscle. So think of Glory with Denzel. Oh, Lord, Denzel was fine in that movie. But think of Glory, right? So when you think of Glory, those soldiers, those characters that are portrayed in Glory, formerly enslaved, right? Formerly enslaved. There's a film, I mentioned it last week. I couldn't think of the name of it, and one of the guys in the chat gave me the name, and the literal name of it is Lincoln. Check out that film, Lincoln. That demonstrates it as well. It was a strategy. The Emancipation Proclamation was a strategy used by the United States of America to defend the Union and the Constitution. In addition to that, I would tell you Black folks have been fighting to protect this nation arguably since the Revolutionary War. All right. Arguably since the Revolutionary War. Shawana, you may have known it, but a lot of people don't know it. Some people do think it's, and they believe it because they've been mistaught. Like, because we have this thing in the United States, we love to create heroes out of people. So they will manipulate history and make it as if Lincoln was some hero and he freed the enslaved people, right? It was strategy. Now, was the war about slavery? Absolutely. It was about slavery. The war was about slavery because the nation, as was many world powers at the time, they were moving away from enslaving people. All right. Abolition was a real thing. And it did not start in the 1800s. It really started in the 1700s on a larger scale. It's just that in the 1800s, because of what was happening globally, it was becoming the trend. Also, we back up about 25, 28 years, and you look at Texas. And I'm going to use Texas as an example again, because this is where I live and it helps keep me sharp for what I have to do. But when we look at Texas, the whole reason why Texas became a part of the United States, the reason why Texas became a part of the United States, why it stopped being a sovereign nation after its independence from Mexico, is because they were broke and they did not know how to govern. But the reason why they became a sovereign nation in the first place was because of the same damn thing, slavery. Okay. When Anglo-Saxons, right, white people, when Anglo-Saxons who had settled throughout the southern states of the United States, when they came to Mexico, they came because they were invited. So the government had invited Anglo-Saxons and they offered them an opportunity to be impresarios. They offered them an opportunity to be impresarios. Basically, here, you come to our land. We have all this land. We need you to work this land and develop it, right? When they came, they didn't just come with their family members. They brought enslaved people with them because that was a part of their culture and their practice, and their pride was to enslave other people. Yes, their culture, their practice, and their pride was to enslave other people. Okay. And so when the Anglo-Saxons came to Texas, they brought their enslaved populations with them. Mexico had a problem with that. Mexico was like, hell no. Mexico was like, we don't do that here. That's illegal here. We ended that. And I think I told you all that Guerrero, he had ended slavery. He was a president, former president of Mexico, but he ended slavery. Okay, and so that wasn't legal. We talked about the same thing in Florida. Florida was a Spanish territory, and so they welcomed enslaved people who were runaways, right? They welcomed them into their territory, and they went to Fort Mose, which is basically St. Augustine, right? They went to Fort Mose, which was a fort right outside of St. Augustine. You know, St. Augustine was the oldest city in Florida, was founded by Ponce de Leon. Okay. Yes, Guerrero was Black. He was Afro-Mexican. He was Black. Yes. All right. So you saw where Spanish territories throughout the Americas, all right, Spanish territories throughout the Americas, that's North America, Florida and Texas, right? Or Florida and Mexico, um, the Caribbean, and parts of South America were relinquishing that stronghold of slavery. They were moving away from it. You see this gradually um, over a period of time. So, still on Texas, the Anglos in Texas, led by Stephen F. Austin, um, they declared war on Mexico after Stephen F. Austin walked from San Felipe, which is west of Houston. He marched or rode a horse. I don't know how he got there, but he went from west of Houston. So if you've ever been to Houston, you've been to Katy, past Fulshire, right? He marched from San Felipe, Texas to Mexico City. Now, if you put that in Google, that's probably about a 14, 15-hour drive. They didn't have colas. And so he marched his ass down to Mexico City. And the Mexican government, the Mexican officials was like, boy, you done lost your mind. And so he went down there to make demands. And the main demand was about slavery and about the language. They did not want to speak Spanish, even though they had moved to, and that's why it'd be so funny, right? When I hear stuff today, I just laugh because are you kidding me? They didn't want to speak Spanish and they did not want to stop enslaving people. Okay. They did not want to stop enslaving people. And so when he was released and he returned back to San Felipe, they what was I gonna say? They went ahead and that's when all the hell broke loose. So Texas eventually they lose at the Alamo. You know, they always tell you remember the Alamo. They lost at the Alamo. But later Sam Houston, and Demi, I see what you said. Sam Houston is the one who has that big statue on the freeway up 45 north of the Woodlands, which is the most northern suburb of Houston. That's Sam Houston. And Houston is not named for Sam Houston, by the way. But Sam Houston was and I say that because a lot of people think that is so, and it's not. Because I used to think that till I learned otherwise. But Sam Houston ended up being the one who defeated Santa Anna, president of Mexico. Santa Anna was defeated in an area of what I call Metro Houston, but just south of Houston, southeast of Houston, Sam Houston defeated Santa Anna. And that's how Texas got its independence from Mexico. So if you ever want to know how Texas got its independence from Mexico, it was the Battle of San Jacinto. Sanjacinto. San Jacinto. Okay. The Battle of San Jacinto. So when Texas gets its independence, they don't fare too well for too long. One, because these are former farmers. They weren't like scholars. They were not formally educated. They were not, for the most part, upper echelon or lawyers. They weren't politicians, so to speak, right? And so they knew what they wanted. They wanted to continue to enslave people, but they did not know how to government. They did not know how to government at the time. They did not know how to run government. And so Texas really struggled as a sovereign nation. Remember, so now it's the United States of America, there's Texas, and there's Mexico. Okay. So Texas was a nation. It went from being an area in a nation to being a sovereign nation. And so after a while, what they did was they petitioned for statehood. So the same folks who had just left the United States because there was an opportunity for them in Mexico, they didn't like how Mexico, they came to Mexico, didn't want to follow Mexico's rules, fought with Mexico, got the land, created their own sovereign nation, right? Then they had to turn back to the United States and was like, knock, knock, can we come home? But we're not just coming home, we're coming home with territory, with land, with resources. And when that vote was taken, now I'm about to test y'all, right? Because we've talked about a whole bunch of stuff, right? How did Texas become constitutionally? This is the question. Constitutionally, how did Texas become a state? Which constitutional device, if I were in my real classroom, this would be a question on the exam. Which constitutional device? So what part of the Constitution, where in the Constitution would Texas have utilized in order to become a state, from going from a sovereign nation to becoming a state? Which article? Which article of the U.S. Constitution? And we went over this. We had a whole lecture about this. Baby, I hear the Jeopardy music. Do, 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 do. Come on, y'all. Y'all know this answer. We talked about this. Article 4. Thank you, Shawana. Article 4. Because Article 4, section, I don't know if it's section 3 or 4. Article 4. No, it's Article 4. Article 4, remember, is about federalism. It's about, section 3. Thank you, Shelby. Article 4 is about federalism, the relationship between a central government and regional governments, right? So the federal government and the states, the state and the counties and the cities, right? A central government and regional governments. That is federalism, right? The relationship, though. So when we get to section 3 of Article 4, it's telling you who can create a state. So now that's my next question. Who can create a state? Who can create a state? I don't know who Super Classic Cars is, but baby, we follow. You're not coming on camera. I don't have time for that. Congress, all right? Congress. Congress is how you get into the union. So I want y'all to do a quick search for me. I want y'all to look up the Senate vote to Texas confirmation. And make sure you put U.S. Senate. And see what it was. I want y'all to see how close it was. There were 52 states at the time. Not 52, 21 states at the time. Is that right? I'm getting my math mixed up, y'all. I don't do math. I do calculators. I'm talking about 52 states. We don't have 52 states today. There were 52 votes. My bad. There were 26 states. Look at the vote though. I want you to, there were 26 states. There are 26 states a part of the United States of America at the time of Texas's application. All right. I want you to look up the confirmation vote through the US Senate to see just how close the vote was. And then we're going to talk about that vote. And then we're going to switch from Texas specifically and go back to the Confederacy in general. All right. Anybody find the answer? Hold on. Thank you, Ms. Roan. Ms. Roan is correct. 27 to 25. 27 to 25. Now, what does that tell y'all about the conscience of the nation? What does that tell you all about the conscience of the nation when Texas in 1845, right? So this is 20 years before Reconstruction, 16 years before the Civil War. All right. They weren't only divided. Yes, Demi says they were divided. Now, the reason why they were divided is I just told you all when I talked about Lincoln, when I talked about the Emancipation Proclamation, the United States, like other nations, were beginning to move away from the idea of specifically the trading, right? So the slave trade, meaning you could not import people, that was ending, became very much so restrictive, but nations were ending slavery as a whole. So if in 1845 it was already tight to come in, and the reason why it was tight was because majority of the Senate opposed slavery. All right. So when we look at it like that, it gives us a purview of the mentality as it related to slavery. Slavery was a big deal. All right. And then when you look at the House of Representatives, so we'll go back to our earliest lectures. When we look at the House of Representatives, the vote was 132 to 76. Now that seems like a huge difference, 132 to 76. But let me show you where the rubber meets the road on that. Every state has the same amount of US senators, right? But when it comes to representation in the House of Representatives, it's based off of what? This early lecture. What is it based off of? Yes, it's based off population. Thank you all. It's based off population, right? And so population, which states do you think were the most populated? Y'all already know the answer. So first the Senate voted. Had Senate votes been reversed? No, Jabari. We're talking about in the 1800s, 1845 specifically. Not 2025, but in 1845, that would have been South Carolina, Georgia, right? Virginia, North Carolina, because why did they have the greater populations, the larger populations? They had the larger populations because go back to our earliest lectures, like week 1, week 2, and you recall that when they were having a constitutional convention in Philadelphia, the reason why they were going back and forth between the New Jersey plan and the Virginia plan was slavery, because New Jersey wanted representation based off equal representation, and Virginia and the other states that were heavily populated by enslaved people, they wanted it based off population, because they knew that they would have greater numbers because they enslaved more people, which gave them a bigger population. And the argument to that was, but you don't count them as people, you count them as livestock, you count them as chattel, hence chattel slavery. And so the 3/5 compromise comes into play. It still comes into play today. And we've hinted to it, we've kind of touched it. We're going to get to it. All right. But the 3/5 compromise was applicable then. It was applicable when Texas applied for statehood. It was applicable in this past November. All right. And we're going to talk about all of those things. So the 3/5 compromise, just in case anybody has heard this before, let me correct it. Do I have my measuring cup? No, but I have this bottle of Topo Chico, right? I have this bottle of Topo Chico. All right. This isn't saying that 3/5 of this is a person. It's saying for every 5 people, for every 5 enslaved people you have, you can count 3. Okay. Now, they may have made people feel as though, oh, I got some containers because I got some product I got to do today. All right. I like to demonstrate. So I have 5 containers in my hand. We only gonna count 3 of y'all. So these, you little brown people, you little black and brown people, it's 5 of y'all. 3 of y'all can be counted towards the population. The other 2 can't. Okay, so the other 2 have to be hidden. Only 3 of y'all get to be counted. That was the compromise. So when we look at Congress, particularly at the House of Representatives in 1845, when that vote for Texas statehood is taking place, when we look at the House of Representatives, we see the vote was 132 to 76. That doesn't mean majority of states. That means majority of representation for the various states voted that way to bring Texas in. But you can see the true conscience of the nation when you look at the Senate vote, because the Senate has equal representation. So you see that 27 to 25. All right. You need those containers, Shawana. Baby, you can place an order at Just Whip, then I'll send you some. Yes, baby, I'm always hustling. Every day I'm hustling. So that's a good time for a commercial break. So listen, this is federal government. This is week 6. We're talking about Reconstruction. We just did a somewhat of a review. If you're enjoying this, go ahead and share with 3 other people. Make sure you like. You can contribute to the hearts. I got 2 out of 10. Y'all know I try to get my 10 each class. So I'm at 2 out of 10. If y'all want to send me some hearts to get those numbers up, I'd appreciate it. Now I'm at 3 out of 10. Thank you, Jana. Thank you so much. We can run those numbers up. But very important, make sure, thank you, Jabari. Make sure that you follow here on TikTok. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube. In order to subscribe to the YouTube, you can do it now or you can wait. You go to my page, there's a link to the YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Under the description on the YouTube is a Google form, a link to a Google form. Register for the class. Thank you. Oh, I'm at 50%. Thank you, Grand Diva. Make sure you register for the class by completing that Google form. Your Google form is not complete if you do not include an email. Matter of fact, you just wasted your time by filling it out if you're not going to include your email, because your email, I need that because weekly I send an email. I send an email each week letting you know. I send the recording from the previous week. I send links. And I also let you know about the next video, the next live video, the next recording, the next class, and any other applicable information. So you want to make sure that when you register, you include your email, unless you just know you gonna be on TikTok and know when I'm going live. But if you don't want to share your email, at the very least, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube. The YouTube is where all of our recordings are stored. So yes, this is a live stream, but on YouTube, it will be permanently in at the channel, at Pretty Petty Politics on the channel. All right. Next, thank you all so much. Next, let's move away from Texas a little bit, right? Let's move from Texas and let's look at the Confederacy as a whole. So we have the CSA and the USA, right? The CSA and the USA. 1860, South Carolina withdraws or succeeds. All right. It's important that we use the proper language. They succeeded, SECED, right? They succeed from the Union. So I know a lot of times when we talk about the Civil War, we have the habit of saying the North versus the South. No. The North versus the South is misleading. It's not wrong, but it's misleading and it's not correct. Sometimes you're not wrong, but you're not correct. And that is an instance where saying North versus South doesn't make you wrong, but it does not make you correct either. Because those southern states that you're referring to were no longer states when the Civil War happened. They had become enemies of the state, capital S, enemies of the state, like the film Enemy of the State. They had become foreign enemies. Okay. They had become foreign enemies because they had succeeded. They had left the Union, right? We have this Union. They had withdrawn. They succeeded from the Union. And they had declared that they was going to whoop up on the Union. So they are now an enemy, a foreign enemy. They're no longer domestic. So that's not North versus South. Daniel Shea was a domestic enemy, kind of. When he ran up on the governor of Massachusetts. Okay. And I'm being facetious with that, but with the Daniel Shea part. But we don't call it North versus the South. Okay. It's the Union, the United States of America, the Union Army. Y'all do realize we are a union. The United States of America is a union. It's a union comprised of all of the states. They join together and create a union, a more perfect union, right? These are phrases that you've heard before, but I don't think that we put them into the full context to understand. As a nation, we are a republic. Okay? As a nation, we are a republic. If any of y'all have watched Scandal, baby, I love me some Scandal. First of all, I watched Scandal when it first came out. I don't mean in the fall when it came out of 2012, but in the spring of 2012, when it first came out, those first episodes, where it was a really short season. I have been there with Scandal from day one, and I have watched the whole series at least 10 times since then. So over the past 13 years. And one of my favorite things about the writing in Scandal, shout out to Shonda Rhimes, is the language that's used, the references, especially that would come from Papa Pope, right? He would always talk about the republic. And I just want to emphasize the republic. Okay. Someone says we need to call our union rep. You better call your representatives. I can't call mine. Mine just passed away. Yeah. Rest in peace to Sylvester Turner. I'm still very bummed out about this. Woosah. All right. So the Union versus the Confederacy. So we have these states that who have withdrawn, succeeded, starting with South Carolina in 1860. The significance of that is South Carolina stood on their ideology, their business. They stood on it so strong. Like they were the first. They were the first to withdraw. By 1861, several others had withdrawn. Where did the Civil War take place? Where did the Civil War take place? Who can tell me? Where did the Civil War take place? Where did it start? Who can tell me? Where did the Civil War start? I got Atlanta in the chat. Anyone else? Where did the Civil War start? Courtney, thank you. I got Virginia and I got Charleston, South Carolina. So it started at Fort Sumter, South Carolina. Fort Sumter. And most of us have heard of Fort Sumter. All right. Fort Sumter. That is where the Civil War popped off. Okay. That is where things popped off in 1861. All right. South Carolina withdrew from, and I just like to give you timelines. South Carolina withdrew from the Union in December of 1860, and by April of 1861, the Civil War begins. Okay. December, so January, February, March, April, we got war. Okay. I like to put it in context so that you can see it, right? Not just words or theories. I want us to really put it into context how quickly this thing escalated. All right. 1860, they withdraw December. And then after them, multiple other states would join them. We all following? Okay. So let me change this banner. So it really should not say that. It shouldn't say Reconstruction right now. It really should say Civil War. Because that's what we're talking about. So Civil War takes off. The Confederate States of America are kicking ass and taking names. Like they are winning as a strategy. As a strategy, Lincoln moves forward with the Emancipation Proclamation. Who hears the Emancipation Proclamation? Someone hears it and they make their own declaration. All right. John Wilkes Booth hears it and makes a declaration of his own. What was his declaration? We know the outcome, but what was his declaration? Hi, Pam. What was John Wilkes Booth's declaration? He was like, he ain't gonna make another speech. That'll be the last speech he'll make. Right? That'll be the last speech he'll make. So he red rummed him. Okay? He red rummed him. Since I can't say the M word, I'll remix it. Red rum. Y'all scramble the letters. Because that whole saying unalive and all the time be throwing me off. All right. He red rummed him. He red rummed him in his own attempt to stop the emancipation and also to strike fear, to put a stop to any other action, any further action of Abraham Lincoln. Okay. And so when he red rummed him, Andrew Johnson, baby, I have to shake my head to that guy. Andrew Johnson becomes or ascends to the presidency. So he goes from vice president to president. Okay. Andrew Johnson becomes president. Okay. So 1863, the strategy works. What day was Lincoln assassinated? Anybody know? Almost 2 years exactly after the start of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was red rum. Okay. Civil War starts 1861, and Lincoln is killed. I said 2 years, 4 years, 65. Okay. Is that 2 years? 61, 1, 2, 63. He gets the emancipation. So 1, 2, 2 years and 4 months. His strategy works though. His strategy was to build up. I know I'm moving kind of slow this morning. I'm tired. I really am tired. I need a nap. I woke up early. But his strategy was to beef up. Y'all can't see my arm. So to beef up the military, the Union military. And so he successfully does that to help defend the Union. He was successful in it. He had created his own recruitment system, damn near, right? Because people came to fight for the Union. And it was very strategic because who knew the land, who knew the layouts better than those who lived there, the enslaved people? They were able to easily convey information. So let's talk about some of the things that happened during the Civil War that, hey, Tim, that helped with the success of the Union. So there's a guy named John. Is it John? Damn. I don't know if it's John or James. We'll go with John. But Smalls is his last name, so we just call Smalls. So Smalls, he worked for a guy who was a captain who sailed a ship, and they took the ship. They took over the ship. Smalls and other Black people, they took over that ship or that boat. And they were able to, he like put on a hat and a coat to look like the captain to sneak past the Confederate, like, let's say, outposts that looked at the water. So they were able to sail past them. And he literally took that boat to the Union, right? To help the Union. And he would go on and be one of the most prominent people in South Carolina history, not just Black people, but people, period. He would become an elected official. I want to say he was either, he became a state senator or representative. I don't know if he was a state senator or a U.S. representative for South Carolina, but he became very prominent. But it started with him stealing that boat, taking possession of that ship to aid the Union. All right. Y'all got that? Smalls. Anybody find his name? All right. Anybody find Smalls' his first name? I don't know if it's James or John. It might not be either one. Like I said, I'm tired. So in the period of the Civil War, it was very strategic what Lincoln did. It was very game changing to utilize the very people who this thing is being fought over, essentially, right? Because the Confederate States, when you look at their, I don't care what they say today, right? The Confederate States of America, I don't care what people say today. The documents that were published by the Confederate States of America, Robert Smalls, thank you. It was Robert Smalls. I'm talking about John. I told y'all I'm tired. I'm sleepy. But Robert Smalls stole the boat. Thank you so much. But when you look at their documents, like I referred to Texas's documents, Texas hadn't been a part of the United States but 16 seconds when it withdrew, when it seceded from the Union. When you look at their documents, they don't hold back. You know, usually government documents are long. First, you know, out the gate, they telling you this thing is about slavery. All right. When you look at the Declaration of Causes for the state of Texas, when you look at it for the state of Florida, for South Carolina, when you look at the Confederate States of America, when you look at their paperwork, they make it very clear this thing is about slavery. So it was very strategic of Lincoln to say, oh, let me emancipate them and invite them to come on and, you know, come fight for the Union. All right. 1865. Lincoln dies, what have you, but 1865, the war is ending, right? It's wrapping up. Like right about now, that thing is wrapping up. Okay. And so then you start seeing Confederate States of America, those states that are a part of the Confederate States of America, not the United States of America. Because let's look at it in quarters. So Q1 and Q2 of 1865, they are the Confederate States of America. They are not a part of the United States of America. All right. But they begin to do what? As they're trying to reposition themselves, and they're like, hey, we need some of that union. We need to come back home. So we're gonna oblige y'all. Y'all done beat us. You done beat us down. We're going to need some statehood. And we know one of the ways that we get statehood is we got to emancipate these people. So everyone talks about Texas in June 19th, but Florida was in May, like May 20th, May 21st, like a month before Texas. You look at Alabama, you look at Georgia, you look at the other states of the Confederate States of America, and you begin to see the same thing. Now, when it was time for them, now we're moving into Reconstruction. Civil War's ended, we're moving into Reconstruction. When it's time to come get statehood, Andrew Johnson is now president. Remember, Lincoln's assassinated he dies April 15th, 1865. Andrew Johnson is now president. Andrew Johnson is like, y'all can come back home, come to death row, but you got to kiss the ring first. And he literally made them come grovel to him. He wasn't shit. Now, let me be clear. Ain't nothing great about Andrew Johnson, right? But he made them crawl back and beg, basically. And the problem with that was they were enemies. They should have been thrown in prison. They shouldn't have received any favors. So when we see history repeat itself, when people attack the Union, 2021, you shouldn't see in 2025 that they are pardoned. So people who attacked the Union in 1861 through the Civil War, they shouldn't have been pardoned and receive curry and favor from the president in 1865. But see, when we don't learn history, we repeat history because we don't know. Andrew Johnson. Yes, Stan. Exactly. That's why I said 2021. All right. So Now we're in the Reconstruction period. It's called Reconstruction because that's literally what had to be done. This was toe up from the flow up. You ever seen a building, like a brick building, an older building that they've started demolition on it, but they haven't finished it? So there's no roof. There may be a piece, maybe one wall still up, exterior wall, and the other exterior walls are kind of crumbled. You might see some steps. Just imagine that all over the place, right? Right? Imagine that all over the place. Shawana, I don't say that they don't want it to be taught because it be in the book. We just don't like to read, and we don't like to read further because a textbook can only put so much in there. But every once in a while, you get a couple of public school teachers who actually teach it, right? You will get some who will teach it, but the focus of our public schools is testing because that's where the money resides. All right. Shout out to Rod Page and George W. Bush for No Child Left Behind because it's done left everybody behind. But as long as you can read, you can learn. All right. So in the Reconstruction period, the nation is toe up from the flow up, and they're literally having to rebuild. There are different commissions. So you have the Freedmen's Bureau, Freedmen's, Freedmans. The Freedmen's Bureau is created. You have people who are receiving land. And as they receive land, they're working the land. They are, being Lord, I don't even have the words. I'm so tired. But they're able to take care of things for themselves and for their communities. And they're rebuilding, but now they're rebuilding as freedmen. Freed women, right? Black people are now free. The self-sustaining. Thank you, Shawana. Child, thank you. But the period of the Freedmen's Bureau distributing land, that period does not last a long time. It doesn't last a long time because people are out for self politically, Andrew Johnson. And so that does not last a long time. So we have this agency established to help people, and then we have that agency taken away. Okay. In addition to that, people were being given back their land. People who had been enemies of the state, enemies of the union. And when I say enemies of the state, that's a capital S. Okay. But they had the opportunity to regain control of lands that had previously been taken during war as spoils of war. To the victor goes the spoils. Okay. So as this is happening, it's causing friction, right? You have these people who have had power and control over another group of people now confronting those people through threats. So now you have these massacres that are taking place, some that are on record. So you can actually pull up congressional hearings. If you probably want to do it ASAP because I don't know how much longer stuff going to be available in the National Archives. Shout out to Skip Gates, Henry Louis Gates, because he has used many of those testimonials, right? Those testimonies given in front of Congress. He has pulled those records through the years. You can hear him in his different documentaries. Also, you have Dr. Eric Foner, Foner, who is probably the most celebrated Reconstruction era historian. So if you read his books or if you just Google him, I'm sure you probably even reach out to him. But if you know a librarian, ask them to help you utilize a database to pull specific congressional hearing testimonies. So you can pull congressional hearing testimonies from the Reconstruction era, that are testimonies given by Black people, our ancestors, attesting to what they experienced during that period. That includes grapes. Y'all call it graping. So that includes grape. I hate this app because it's still all my language. That includes graping. That includes red rums. That includes arson. So you'll see records from like the Memphis riots, right? You will see records from people giving testimonies about how their land and their farms were stolen from them, right? All of this is taking place during Reconstruction. Some people were able to hold on. Then in 1865, at the end of 1865, we get the 13th Amendment. And that is the amendment that was passed in January of that same year, but it had not been ratified until December of 1865. So the 13th Amendment is ratified in December of 1865, so it becomes law. That is the amendment that emancipates all people except for those who are duly convicted. So do we have slavery in the United States today? Yes, they are duly convicted. Now I have a question for you. This is a homework question. Write this down. Are people who are imprisoned in the United States of America, are they counted in the census for exact numbers, or are they counted based on the 3/5 compromise today? So do we count them for every five? For every five, are we counting all five, or are we just counting 3 of our imprisoned today for the purpose of census, which then we use those census numbers for representation purposes when we are redistricting every 10 years. All of this stuff is intertwined. All right. All right. So I see y'all with your answers, but I want y'all to think about it. All right. They are counted where they are incarcerated. That is correct, Shelby. Not where they were from. Okay. So during Reconstruction, we have those things going on. You have massacres. You have massacres going on all over the place. And I'm talking about we're still in the Reconstruction era, right? And the reason why these massacres are taking place is because of the aggressive nature of the resilience, the ingenuity, the brilliance of Black people creating community. Black people got freed and they began to build, almost as if they knew what a society was supposed to exist with. Imagine that. Imagine Black people who had been enslaved generationally still having a concept of what a society should look like. Things that they did. They built stores, they built homes, they built newspapers, they built schools. How did they know to do these things? They knew to do these things because it was not foreign to them. It was not lost upon them. They were not their condition. And that's something we have to work on. We have to work on not being our condition. You always have to remember from whom you come from. They knew who they were. In fact, when Black people started building schools, those were the first public schools. Okay? Those were the first public schools. We know John D. Rockefeller gets credited with the industry of schools today, and others get celebrated for that. And yes, what Rockefeller did was a concept of schools, public schools, that prepared you for the workforce, But that's not what them black folks was on during Reconstruction. They weren't preparing you for the workforce. They were just preparing you to make sure you had knowledge. Rockefeller created the 8-hour school day with the schedule so that you'll be ready for an 8-hour work day. Okay. But we created these full infrastructures, full communities. You look at Memphis, if you ever look at Memphis history, okay? Memphis is a great example. Charleston, South Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, okay? These are great examples following the Civil War. Atlanta. There are also some smaller areas. Also, you have New Orleans. But this is what we were doing, and that became a threat. So people would come in, they would use intimidation, they would red rum through lynching, right? To intimidate and to run people off. Okay. One that I really want you to pay attention to is the Memphis riots or the Memphis massacres. Okay. That took place in Memphis. And you can also pull up, again, I want to emphasize, you can pull up congressional hearings about these incidents. In particular, I want you to look up the enforcement acts. I had to close my eyes to see my notes in my head. I want you to pull up the enforcement acts. All right. There were 3 enforcement acts. The enforcement acts were led by, what's the attorney's name? It starts with an A. I can't think of his name. The enforcement acts came about during Reconstruction to enforce the law. All right. To enforce these laws, to protect people. The third enforcement act was about the Klan, literally the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, right? But the Attorney General of the United States and essentially the Department of Justice and the FBI, these are all seemingly connected to the impact of what was happening to Black people because of their emancipation. All right. If this has been good to you, go ahead and do me a favor. Like, share, and follow. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube. We have about 30 more minutes of lecture because it's we're at an hour and almost 18 minutes. So I will stop around, I don't know what time it is. It's 11:45. I'm going to stop at 10 minutes after 12. We'll do some Q&A. All right. We'll do some Q&A at 12:10, and I'm talking Central Time. So it's 11:47 now. I'm going to stop at 12:10. We'll do Q&A, and then I'll give instructions for next week. All right. So we got the 13th Amendment. That's 1865. A year later, June of 1866, Congress passes the 14th Amendment. Now, remember, I'm going to keep saying this. When we look at these amendments, I'm going to typically give you 2 circumstances: when it passed and when it became law. All right. It passed Congress, but it has to be ratified by the states. So the 14th Amendment would be ratified in July of 1868. The 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is the one that gives you citizenship. The 14th Amendment is the one that gives us citizenship. So 14th Amendment comes with citizenship, privileges and immunities, due process, and equal protection under the law. That's the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment does this. I'm glad I got these containers here. 14th Amendment does this. Put this container back in this plastic. Oh, all right. This is the U.S. Constitution up until the time of the 14th Amendment. This cap represents, no, I'm going to say this container represents the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. Okay. Represents the Bill of Rights dealing with the federal government. This top represents the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment attaches to this and makes it applicable to the states. All right. It connects back over, not back, not forward. It doesn't connect forward. It connects back over and attaches to make those laws applicable to the states. Because you have to remember, we've gone over the entire Constitution, and we've gone over amendments, and we're at 14. But you remember when we did the 10th Amendment, we talked about how anything not mentioned in the lower amendments were reserved to the states. So it attaches back over to attach everything else to the states. And I hope that makes sense. All right. So the 14th Amendment, we get that equal protection under the laws. We get due process. Due process is you can't be deprived of your life, your liberty, or your property without due process. So I can't just come and take your land from you without due process of law. Well, that's exactly what the hell they had been doing. They had been coming, taking people land. No just compensation. It was you just got 10 minutes to get up out of here, or else we're gonna red rum you and string you up a tree. Okay, that's not due process, but that was very much so what happened throughout that period following the Civil War, prior to Jim Crow era really taking off. So that window of Reconstruction leading up to that Jim Crow era, that's where we saw a lot of this stuff happen. So you have the 14th Amendment that comes in 1868. And then 2 years later, you get the 15th Amendment in 1870. You get the 15th Amendment. And the 15th Amendment provides the right to vote to men. Black men voted as a community. So they might meet up at Yo Missionary Baptist Church, and it's the grandma, the grandpas, the mamas, the daddies, the uncles, and the kids, and they are discussing how those men would go vote. They were also discussing what time they would go vote, not just how they would vote on those ballots, but when they would vote, because there were threats about voting. People would be threatened. There would be mobs waiting to discourage folks from voting. Like, this is very real. I know a lot of times when we talk about voting, people tell you, oh, somebody died for you to have a right to vote. And I know we don't want to hear that, but that's very much so the truth. A lot of people die. A lot of people put themselves and their families in harm's way to vote, particularly during the election of Ulysses S. Grant. Ulysses S. Grant was a general for the Union Army. Who had fought for the Union Army? A lot of these formerly enslaved men. They had fought for the Union Army. So, of course, they're going to vote. Now that they have the right to vote, they're going to vote for that general. Okay? Because he essentially led the war that led to their full concept of being freed. Okay. So I do want to say this. Prior to the 15th Amendment being passed, prior to the passage of the 15th Amendment, Black men did vote, though. Black men were registered to vote throughout the southern states that had become, who had left the Confederate, who had denounced their succession from the Union. Remember, they had succeeded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. So now they've denounced the CSA. They groveled and come back to the USA, right? And in some of those states like Georgia, you had people who were able to register to vote long before the ratification of the 15th Amendment. For instance, 15th Amendment is 1870. July 2nd, 1867, my great grandfather registered to vote in Glenn County, Georgia. That's Brunswick, Georgia, for anybody wondering. That's very south, very close to Jacksonville, Florida, on the water. So that's where you have St. Simon Island, down in that part of the state of Georgia, far from Atlanta, close to Jacksonville. You had people registered to vote. And when I look at the document, because I have a copy of his voter registration, because they used to register them in like these big books. There's another Black man on the same page, because they would fill it in registration by registration. It's not alphabetical order or anything like that. It's based on when you come in, the dates. They write your number down. But they identify them as COL''D, colored. Okay. But that's just an example. Again, that was 1867, July 2nd, 1867. It's not until 1870 when the 15th Amendment becomes law. All right. So with these three Reconstruction era amendments, we got 13, 14, 15. These three amendments changed the nation in many ways. It made slavery legal to an extent. That's one. It emancipated people, but it also made slavery legal to an extent. It established citizenship along with privileges and immunities, due process, and equal protection under the law. 14th Amendment, the most powerful amendment, the amendment that is argued the most in court. All right. The 14th Amendment is the one. 14th Amendment is like a hollow point. It's going for it all the way. It's going to pierce. All right. And then you have the 15th Amendment, the one that provides voting. That's our first amendment about voting. First federal anything about voting is the 15th Amendment. Prior to the 15th Amendment, who could vote? Landowners. You had to be male and you had to be a landowner to vote. So what does that tell you about my great-great-great-grandfather? He was a landowner, and that land is still in our family today. In fact, we went to that area and looked at that land 2 years ago in 2023 during a family reunion. So when we look at it in the historical context, we're not as far away from that time period as it seems when we look at it by dates. All right. You can also look at it based on generations, right? You know, the generations in your family. And we all can find this stuff for ourselves. It's just a matter of reading. So don't ever say what somebody ain't taught you. As long as somebody taught you to read, now if ain't nobody ever taught you to read, then that's what we need to work on. But as long as you can read, baby, you can do some things. You can do some things. So thank you, Sparky. That is an amazing legacy for my family. And it hits different knowing it. Because when I learned about him being a registered voter, it was almost like his spirit was talking to me like, see, girl, that's why you be so crazy about this stuff. It's in your blood, you know, and it wasn't a thing that came about in the 1960s. For my family, it came about in the 1860s, right? But anyway, beyond that, I want you to look at these three amendments for what they were. They were created for us, Black people, but they also have been created and have aided the entire populace. And that's not a bad thing. They have been created and have aided an entire populace. Everyone gets to win because of those things. All right. So let's look at, I'm trying to monitor the time to know how deep I want to go. So instead of looking at these amendments individually and their impact today. I'm going to just do a little bit about the 13th, and we'll pick up with the 13th next week. So when we look at the 13th Amendment, yes, we know that it abolishes slavery, and there's an exception. So it abolishes kind of, right? It abolishes, well, kind of, right? So we'll just do it like a slant, kind of, sort of, right? So we had a slant. It abolishes slavery to an extent, and that extent is if you have been duly, D-U-L-Y, not like a truck, but D-U-L-Y, if you've been duly convicted. So what is a conviction? All right. A felony conviction, right? If you are a felony, if you've been convicted of a felony, depending on your state, that could have different meanings. Like, for instance, in the state of Alabama, if you are a convicted felon, you stuck like Chuck. You're stuck in that condition. Even if you have completed your probation or your parole, you've paid all your fees, you still are stuck with the condition of being a felon in the state of Alabama, right? So how does that impact your 14th and your 15th? If your 13th is restrictive, right, because of the conditions of the state, and I'm using Alabama as an example, then when you look at the 14th, you don't have all the rights and privileges of your citizenship. You don't. Because of the way the state law is written, there's a condition and you're under it, right? Because of that felony conviction. Everybody follow that? Y'all got that? And then when you look at the 15th Amendment, what do you not get? You don't get to vote. Again, you don't get your privileges and immunities. All right. Right. I was getting to that, Donna Jean. You typed it just as I was getting ready to say it. So yeah. So it depends on your state. In the state of Texas, if you've been convicted of a felony, you've completed your parole, your probation, you've paid your fees. Once you're made whole by satisfying that, once you've satisfied those things, then you can register to vote. You've been restored. You've been made whole in the state of Texas. So every state has its own laws concerning that exception in the 13th Amendment. Now, could another amendment come about that provides a uniform standard as it relates to the exception in the 13th Amendment? It could. Is it likely? No. But it could if we wanted it to. We could do that. Congress could create legislation that establishes a constitutional standard of rights being restored, right? Or an act of Congress, right? But it has to come through Congress because states reserve the ability to create their own laws. So if the Supreme Court or Congress have not made some uniformity or some federal standard as it relates to the condition of your felonhood, and that's the best phrase I can come with, unless there has been some federal law established, then each state will be able to do what they want to do. Similar, I gave you an example, I think, with marriage. Up until 1967, states could determine about marriage. Some places in the United States would allow for interracial marriage. Some states didn't. So Virginia did not. Washington, D.C., not even a state, just a territory or a district. Washington, D.C. did. So Mildred and Richard, they went from Virginia to Washington, D.C. to marry, to create a union, and then they returned to Virginia. Virginia's like, y'all better get the hell out of it. We're going to throw you in jail because we don't recognize that marriage here. That's not a marriage here, right? And so that relates back again to the Constitution That relates back to the Fourth Amendment. Okay. But because of the Fourth Amendment and not the Fourth Amendment, Article 4, excuse me, that relates back to Article 4, right? That federalism, right? So states should give full faith and credit to the records. Remember that in Article 4, to the records, and like two other things, right? But you should give full faith and credit to the records of the other states. Well, not concerning marriage. They reserved that because there was no federal law addressing it until Richard and Mildred, more Mildred, because Mildred pushed that. She pushed it all the way. Mildred and Richard Loving, until they won their lawsuit against the state of Virginia, Loving versus Virginia, when they pushed that to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court unanimously decided that in the United States, marriage was a fundamental right. So no state can deny marriage on the basis of race. Then states could not deny it anymore. So it would need to be a case similar to that, but focused on felonhood, right? So once someone has satisfied the conditions of their conviction, that condition should be lifted, because people should have a fundamental right as citizens to enjoy all the privileges and immunities and the equal protection and the right to vote. All right. So hopefully that went well for you all. You enjoyed that. We're going to pick back up with the 13th Amendment in our next class. And I want to talk about prisons today, right? So our plantations of the 21st century. Going to talk about that. If you have not ever, I strongly encourage you to watch the documentary, The 13th. I think I've said this before. Watch the documentary, The 13th. It's available on Netflix. It's produced by Ava DuVernay. It came out 2016, I want to say, maybe 17, but I'm pretty sure it was 2016. I want you to watch that documentary. Take notes. Don't allow it to make your blood pressure go up. Just take it in. And if you have not watched it, but you've been attending these classes, the lectures that I've been given should make the documentary not hit as hard, meaning emotionally as hard, because now you have understanding about our Constitution. So now it will make a bit less of an impact emotionally, but it's still gonna make you mad as hell. All right. But it gives great insight. So with that being said, let's talk. What questions do y'all have for me? And then I have a couple of announcements for you. So what questions do you all have? Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate y'all. Someone do me a favor. I'm at 9 of 10 of hearts. So if I can get one more heart today, I will have met my goal. Also, please make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube page, because the YouTube page is where all of the recordings are. So say you got to the lecture late. Thank you, Tori. If you got to the lecture late and you didn't get the full 2 hours or hour and 40 minutes, that's where we are now. If you didn't get the full thing, you can always go to the YouTube and watch the recording and the previous classes. All right. You can watch the recording and the previous classes. So I do want to encourage you to do that. The way to find the YouTube is Pretty Petty Politics. That's the channel, or you could just click the link on my TikTok. All right. So just 2 C's and 2 E's. Do you have books you recommend for additional learning for beyond this class? Yes. Let me grab my book for today. I sure do. Y'all give me a second. I have to climb up to grab this book. Okay. So this book, I follow this guy on Instagram. I don't know if he has a TikTok. He probably does, but I follow him on Instagram. And so this book, I don't know if I bought it last year or the year before. But his name is, the author's name is Jermaine Fowler. You know, I got this book during the pandemic. Y'all, I promise. Pandemic had me mixing up these years, y'all. Everything just seemed to run together. But anyway, his name is Jermaine Fowler, and the name of the book is The Humanity Archive. All right, the Humanity Archive, Recovering the Soul of Black History from a Whitewashed American Myth. So this would be a book I would recommend. But if you want to read for understanding, I would the federal government and our federal documents, the Federalist Papers, all of them are primary resources. The Federalist Papers, so you know, anything by Madison, the Anti-Federalists, the Declaration of Independence. Have y'all read the Declaration of Independence? Like, that's what I want y'all to read. That's your homework. Read the Declaration of Independence. And the reason being is because that's what we need today. Like, when you read the language of the Declaration of Independence, you know, we always talk about the language, the way they spoke. But if you hear what they're saying in the Declaration of Independence, read the Declaration of Independence. That's all I'm going to say. Declaration of Independence. Here's a question. So someone who was convicted and served their time, parole, etc., moves from Alabama to Texas, do they have to abide by the laws out? Yeah, because their conviction is Alabama. Their conviction is Alabama. After full release, can a convicted felon move to another state and have voting rights restored there? Your conviction is based on the place where the conviction took place. So the restoration has to be made whole in the place where the rights were taken. I can't restore the state of me can't restore what the state of them did. You got to fix that over there. All right. Any other questions? All right. Sure. No questions? All right. So what's our homework? The 13th. I'm going to watch the 13th. I have a family member that can't vote in Alabama, but they can vote in Georgia. No, they can't. They ain't doing it legally. They're gonna mess around and get another conviction. Legally, they can't. That doesn't mean that they ain't, but legally they shouldn't. Ooh. Here's something about voting. Yeah, but and so they lied, because on the application it asked, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Period. Or a question mark. Like, that is specific. That it doesn't matter the state. It's asking that for a reason. Yeah. Here's something for you all regarding voting. A couple of things. One, if you are a registered voter, next year you have kids like teenagers, 16 and older, Next year, we have primary elections starting in the first part of the year, early 2026. Um, and every year, all year round, there are elections in your local community. I would recommend that you become an election worker where you work just on election day, whether it's in May or November or in the spring during a primary. Um, Become an election worker. That's important. A lot of people face a lot of things when they go vote. They can be mistreated. They can be, people be like, well, you at the wrong polling location. The whole time you're county, like I'm in Harris County. We have countywide voting. But someone may say you're in the wrong voting location and they turn you away. Well, that's why it's important that we have people present who can be a voice to advocate the law as it concerns voting places and to ensure that people at the very least get a provisionary ballot. All right. So we're going to watch the 13th and we're going to read the Declaration of Independence. And if you're looking for another book, I know each week it seems like I'm giving you a book. I would say The Humanity Archives by Jermaine Fowler. This is available on Amazon. I don't know if Bookshop. So Bookshop is where I buy a lot of my books. I use Soaco, SOACO.com. Soaco. That's the bookstore that I use. That's my online bookstore I use, Soaco.com. Just put it on the chat and YouTube. But order the book. If you use Soaco, that's a Black woman-owned company. But that's where you can get that book probably. So become an election worker if you can. Another thing that I suggest that you consider between now and 2026 as we prepare for the midterms, I suggest you rest. I suggest that anything that happens that pops off in these USA streets, that you can feel how you want to feel, you can emote how you need to emote, but do not take your butts out into them streets to protest or to march. We are resting. We are on time out. I made a video about this. It's on my page, but I just need to say it on this live. We're not responding. And it could be something big that happens that makes you feel like, F that, I'm going out. We're going to protest. No, we're not going to do it. And things are going to happen to encourage you to want to react. Don't do it. Hold back. Go do something else that's hard. Go cook something from scratch that you ain't never cooked from scratch before. Like go repot your plants. I need to repot my plant. That thing is, I need to go today. But go do something hard. You're going to want to react. Don't do it. Don't do it. They're already playing with you with this Chauvin thing. And I think there's something bigger that's going to happen that's going to make you want to do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay. Let's see. I have a question online. We are voting. When I think the question is when your voting rights are restored, does that include your Second Amendment rights? I think that depends on your state. Every state is different. There are no uniform laws to that. Depends on your state. All right. That depends on your state. All right. And speaking of the Second Amendment, go do that. Go do that. Get your ID. Get your ID. Get them things. Get a lot of seeds. Get a lot of seeds. A lot. Get your LTC and get your steel. All right. Make sure you do that. All right. Okay, I did get it right. Okay. Any other questions? No, tell me what's the new law in Florida? My my po home state is always something. Mm. As soon as that one comes up, I'll answer that. Tiana, what's the new law in Florida? Oh, that's in Texas. We have open carry here. So I will tell you this as a suggestion because I'm not a licensed attorney. I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a licensed attorney. So this is not legal advice, but this is a suggestion that if I was, because I am, if I were a citizen of a state where I could own a hand pew, a pew pew, and I'm saying pew pew YouTube because I'm on TikTok and they restricted. So I would protect myself with a license to carry because a license to carry, although it's not required to have because of the law that allows the carrying, although it's not required to have a license to carry, having a license to carry provides you protections and knowledge about the laws that just owning one does not afford you. Okay. And I would also, if it were me, I would get some type of shield as a pew pew toter so that if anything happens, I have some protection if I have to use my pew pew. Mm-hmm. Indiana doesn't require a permit. And I'm telling y'all, do it like this. Although a permit is not required, permits are still available. I'm going to get the permit because it too is available. That makes sense? Although it's not required to have a permit, I'm going to go ahead and get one since they're out there. I'm going to make sure I have one. All right. Although a passport is not required to be a citizen, I'm going to have a passport because they're out there. It's protection. Okay. There's a whole industry designed around permits. There, the people, I mean, they're a whole industry. I know multiple corporations that do training for permits still in these states that don't require a permit. Permits are a good thing, so get one. All right. So make sure you have it. A permit and a passport. The 2 P's. Any other questions? We got 8 minutes, y'all. 8 minutes. Dougie Fresh, you're on. If you're in Houston, if you're in the Houston or Dallas area, and you want information to become a licensed carrier in the state of Texas, hit me up and I will refer you to a company that will provide those services to you. If you're in the Houston or Dallas metropolitan areas, and those are 3 hours away from one another. But if you're in either of those markets, I do have a company that will provide those services to you. All right, looks like y'all don't have no more questions. Going once, going twice. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube. Make sure you follow here on TikTok. Go back and watch my last 2 videos on my page. Honestly, the last 4, but definitely the last 2. But yeah, don't look like y'all got any questions. All right. Peace out, y'all. Bye. See you next week. I'll send emails about class. And of course, there will be a calendar on my TikTok page to alert you that the class is coming up. All right. See you later.